In regards to the design of the ephod, Rashi's opinion in his Pirush ala Torah is generally in accordance with the opinion of the Rambam in his Sefer Hayad, which is, the Rambam says that the ephod, its width was like the width of the back of a person from one shoulder to the other. Its length was from opposite the elbows, from behind him, behind the person, all the way down to his feet. That's what the Rambam says. Generally, Rashi says very similar to the Rambam, and nevertheless, there is a bit of a difference between the words of Rashi and the words of the Rambam. As far as the width is concerned, Rashi says that the width is like the back of a person, v'yoyser, and a bit more. Or as Rashi says elsewhere, that the apron would be folded over, would come around from the front of the kohen over his hips and a little bit over his stomach on each side. Whereas the Rambam says that the width was like the width of the back of a person from one shoulder to the other, which sounds like it's not more than the shoulder. As far as the length is concerned, Rashi says that the ephod was tied opposite his heart, under his elbows, and it reaches all the way down to his heels, whereas the Rambam says that the length is from opposite the elbows, from behind him, so not lower than the elbows as Rashi says, and it reaches only till the raglayim, until the feet, not the heels as Rashi says. So we have three differences, one in the width and two in the length. Says the Rebbe, we could say that these three differences are connected with a general difference in the way Rashi and the Rambam define what the ephod is all about, as we will discuss. But first, we're going to have a look at Rashi's words in the making of the ephod, in the way the ephod was the design of the ephod. Rashi starts off by saying, regarding the ephod, Loi shamaiti, I didn't hear and I didn't find in the Beraisa that discusses these things, I didn't find the meaning and the explanation of the design of the ephod. Says Rashi, V'libi oimerli, my heart tells me that it was tied from his back, around his back. The width is like the width of the back of a person, like an apron, which Rashi calls in Old French pourcint, which this is something that the noble women would wear as they ride on horses, and then Rashi goes on to describe exactly how it's made, with all the details. So the Rebbe asks, we need to understand. We see, as we said before, that besides of a slight difference between the Rambam's opinion and the way he describes the ephod, and Rashi's, generally they're the same. From the fact that the Rambam does not say, v'yirali, it appears to me that this is the shape of the ephod, or a similar sort of expression, which is what the Rambam would usually do when he says a halacha, or the like, on which he doesn't have a direct source. This makes it sound like the Rambam does have a source for the shapes and the measurements of the ephod. Whereas Rashi says, V'libi oimerli, my heart tells me, which sounds like it's a chidush coming up on his own without any source. Furthermore, says the Rebbe, according to the Mefarshei HaRambam, the Rambam's basis, the Rambam's source, is in their simple reading of the Psukim, which is exactly the way and the basis for Rashi's usual explanation on the Torah. So why is Rashi suddenly saying he doesn't have a basis for all of this? Libi oimerli. Although, says the Rebbe, but doiche gadol, we could say that the Rambam somehow had a source in the words of Razal, in another version of the Beraisa of Meleches HaMishkan, or something similar, which the Rashi didn't have. Furthermore, says the Rebbe, Rashi himself continues in his commentary, bringing proofs from the Psukim as a basis for a number of the details and how he describes the shape and design of the ephod. And the Rebbe gives the examples. Rashi says, Ne'emar, it says by David, David chagur ephod bad, David was tied, he was wearing this ephod bad. So number one, says Rashi, from this we see that the ephod is something that you tie. But you can't say that it's only like a belt, and you tie it like a belt, because we have the pasuk that says regarding the ephod, Vayitein olav es ha'ephod, that on top of the me'il, the Kohen Gadol put the ephod, and then it says, Vayachgoir oisei, and he tied it, b'cheishev ha'ephod, he tied it with the belt of the ephod, which then tells you clearly there's an ephod and there's a belt. We also can say that the ephod is referring to the two shoulder straps, which the pasuk speaks about, because the shoulder straps, the Torah refers to as kisfois ha'ephod, the shoulder straps of the ephod, which tells you that the ephod is one thing, the shoulder straps are another thing, and the strap, the belt with which it's tied, is something else. So in other words, Rashi himself is bringing quite a few proofs for the shape and design of the ephod. If that's the case, that Rashi's basis and source for some of these essential things are in the psukim itself, so why is Rashi saying, V'libi oimrli, my heart tells me? In order to understand this, says the Rebbe, we're going to have a look at another question within these psukim, which is actually something that some of the other mefarshim, even those that explain Pshutei Shel Mikra, do deal with, and Rashi seemingly doesn't deal with it at all. In the pasuk, when it starts speaking about the begodim, it says, Ve'ela ha-begodim asher yasu, these are the begodim that should be made, the choshen, the ephod, the me'il, the kseinis tashbeitz, the mitznefes, and the avnit. And the question is, why the other bigdei kahuna are not mentioned over here, namely the tzitz, as well as the michnosayim. Just going to point out over here that with the michnosayim in the inside of the Sicha, the Rebbe doesn't really deal with in the Sicha itself, but right over here in the footnote, the Rebbe does mention the idea that regarding the michnosayim, we could say simply that because, as we'll soon see, most of the begodim are l'chavod u'lesefaris, are for honor and glory. Well, this is different to the mechanasayim, which is something that was an essential thing just for tznius, and it's not something that you wear l'chavod u'lesefaris, so that might be the reason why it's not mentioned right here. But the tzitz is definitely a question, and this is the one that we're mainly going to be dealing with. And the Rebbe says this is a question in Pshutei Shel Mikra, and we seemingly don't find that Rashi should be answering this question. Says the Rebbe that this idea is actually answered when we look at Rashi when he starts speaking about the choshen. And Rashi says the choshen is a tachshit, it's an ornament, keneged alev, against the heart, opposite the heart. How does this help us understand anything? So the Rebbe explains. When we speak about the geder of the bigdei kahuna, what is bigdei kahuna of the Kohen Gadol specifically here we're talking about? Is as the pasuk says, "V'asisa bigdei kodesh." You're going to make, on the one hand, the pasuk refers to them as clothing, as garments, holy garments, la'ari nochicha, and the pasuk says, "L'chavod u'lesefaris," for honor and for glory. So the question now is going to become, which aspect of what this pasuk is saying is the main one, as how we understand the begodim? The Rebbe says we can learn this in two ways. On the one hand, we could say they're primarily bigdei kodesh, they're holy garments. However, these are garments that should be made in a nice, beautiful way, in a special way, with all the special materials of the gold and the tcheles and argamon and the linen, as well as the measurements, the designs, are all being made like royal garments. In that way, they are l'chavod u'lesefaris. So when the pasuk says "V'asisa bigdei kodesh l'chavod u'lesefaris," it's primarily begodim, garments, but they should be made in a beautiful way. Another way of understanding it is exactly the opposite. They're primarily there for covered in sefaras. They're mainly there for the honor and the glory. They're mainly there as tachshitim, as ornaments. However, these tachshitim, these ornaments, are made in a shape of begodim. They're made as garments, as clothes. As the pasuk describes them also as, you should make the big day. You should make these clothes for Aaron Achicha, but they're primarily l'chavod l'sefaras. The Rebbe says, based on this, there's also going to be a difference in the order of importance of the begodim. In other words, which of these are more bigdei kodesh l'chavod l'sefaras, depending on how we define what these things are. If we should understand it in the first way, that they're primarily garments, it's only that you're doing them in a way that they should be beautiful. So then when we look at the tzitz, the whole tzitz is purely a tachshit, it's purely only an ornament, it's not a garment at all. Although, yes, we do count it as part of the Shmoyne Begodim, but it's definitely not in the same category of the other garments of the Kohen Gadol. So that's if we look at it as a garment. Whereas if we look at it the other way around, if they're primarily tachshitim, like the second way, then it would actually come out the other way around. That the tzitz is in the same category of the other ones, and on the contrary, the tzitz would be even like the main one of this category. Because in the tzitz, this idea of tachshit, this idea of an ornament, is even more highlighted than the other bigdei kahuna. Says the Rebbe, now let's look at the Rashi, which we mentioned about the choshen. Says the Rebbe, now we can understand what's one of the reasons why Rashi explains that choshen is a tachshit, it's an ornament keneged alev. Because with this, this will actually help us understand why the Torah is not mentioning the tzitz, which we just asked before, even though the choshen is being mentioned in the Torah. And that's what Rashi is telling us on the choshen, that even though the choshen is a tachshit, even though it's an ornament, but where do you put it? You put it keneged alev, you're putting it over your heart, which is a place where people usually do put on clothes. And therefore it could be included, simply it could be included together with the other begadim. Ve'ela begadim, these are the begadim that you should make. And the choshen is mentioned together with the other begadim, where we said the tzitz was not mentioned. The tzitz is not mentioned because what's the tzitz? The tzitz is not one of these regular garments. The tzitz you're putting, first of all, as the pasuk says, it goes over the mitznefes, hanging with a thread on the mitznefes. Plus it's going on the forehead of Aaron. So it's first of all going off another garment, plus it's going on the forehead of Aaron. This is clearly not a place where you usually put clothes. And therefore it's not one of these big day kodesh that you're going to be making for Aaron, and that's why the pasuk doesn't include it there. Once Rashi established this fact that even the choshen is being put in the place of clothes because primarily these things are garments, in continuation to this, Rashi now deals with the ephod. But I'm first prefacing one more point. And the Rebbe says, Rashi told us already earlier in Parshas Truma that the choshen and the ephod are discussed in Parshas V'ata Tetzaveh, ve'minei tachshit, and they are ornaments. And that's also understood from the simple reading of our psukim in our parsha, that both the choshen and the ephod are definitely not ordinary garments that regular people wear. They are things that are ornaments for beauty, for glory, l'chavod l'sefaris. And this is what Rashi is now coming to tell us. This is his chidush in our parsha when he says, "V'libi oimerli," my heart tells me that it would be tied behind him with its width like the back of a person, like an apron that's called purtzint, which the noble women wear when they're riding on the horses, and then this is the way it's made. What's Rashi trying to say? In other words, like this: although Rashi is bringing proof from the psukim regarding different aspects of the ephod, but what is he bringing proof for? It's only bringing proof that the ephod is something for itself, the shoulder straps are something for themselves, the belt is another thing, and basically Rashi is bringing a proof that this ephod is, as Rashi says, shem tachshit levadi, this is an ornament in its own right. However, from all of these proofs, we still don't understand exactly what kind of ornament we're speaking about. Okay, it's something that's hanging from straps, it's something that's tied, but what kind of ornament are we talking about? From the simple reading of the psukim, that we see that the choshen and ephod are always coming to get near each other, they're always connected to each other. So you might think, you might understand that it's an ornament just on overcovering, it's on a particular part of the body, just like the choshen is on the heart. Maybe this ephod is a particular type of jewelry that sits on a certain part of the person's body. And this is why Rashi comes along and says, "V'libi oimerli," my heart tells me that it's tied behind him like a apron that the noble women wear when they're riding the horses. Meaning that it's not a particular piece of jewelry or ornament on a particular part of the body, but rather it's like a garment. It is an ornament. It is for beauty, but it's the kind that's literally like a garment, like a piece of clothes. Rashi says that. My heart tells me it's like an apron. Because according to Rashi, in Pshutei Shel Mikra, when the pasuk said, "V'asisa big day kodesh," you should make holy garments for Aaron achicha l'chavod l'sefaris, and then it says, "Ve'ela habegadim asher yasu," these are the clothes that you should make. And again, we then take out the tzitz, which is definitely not one of the clothes. So according to Rashi, we have to learn that primarily they are garments, they're clothes. But it's clothes that are made in a type of way, in a type of shape and form, that they are l'chavod l'sefaris, they're beautiful and for glory, etc., etc. In other words, similar to the idea of an ornament. And this is why, in regards to each of the begadim of the big Nikuna, Rashi is trying to emphasize in his words to show us how they are a garment. So that's in regards to the ephod, where he shows us that it's like an apron, and similarly by the choshen, which on the one hand, yes, he does call a tachshit an ornament, but Rashi explains that nevertheless, it's like it's also in the geder, it's also within the realm of begadim, of clothes. It's tachshit keneged alev, you're covering your heart with it. Says the Rebbe, based on all of this, we'll also understand why Rashi adds these words that the noble women wear it when they ride on the horses, because seemingly this is. What is this adding in any way to the explanation about what the ephod is? In other words, Rashi said already it's kaminsin, or it's like an apron. Rashi even uses the old French word for it. He says it's called purtzint. So we understand what it is. What's Rashi trying to say about the noble women on their horses, etc.? Says the Rebbe, because the Rashi is trying to explain to us the geder and the reason of this garment, the point of this garment. So Rashi says, number one, this is something that noble women wear. In other words, it's a special garment of greatness, of royalty. Regular people don't wear it. And therefore, it could be considered a beggar that the pasuk is describing, l'chaved l'sefaris, for honor and for glory. And it comes as following from the choshen, which is clearly a very royal piece of garment / ornament. And what else does Rashi then say? As they're riding the horses, when these women are riding the horses, they're being dressed in more garments as an extra measure of tznius. This is different to a regular piece of jewelry, which will be primarily when you're trying to show off, as the pasuk says in the Megillah, when you're trying to show off to everyone your jewelry and your beauty and things like that. When you're riding on the horse, you're trying to be covered and protected. And this is furthermore pointing out this idea that it's a garment of tznius. Says the Rebbe, now we'll apply this to the Kohen Gadol. Now this Rashi takes to the Kohen Gadol, that it's not just a piece of jewelry that he puts on, an ornament that he puts on, but it's a type of garment. And it's for extra protection or extra tznius for the Kohen Gadol. Just like we learned earlier, when it speaks about the Kohen not going up to the Mizbeach with steps, so that his nakedness shouldn't be exposed. In other words, because of the kedusha of the stones of the Mizbeach, you're not allowed to go up with steps, even though the Kohanim were wearing michnasayim, they're wearing pants. In a similar way, we understand regarding the Kohen Gadol, because of this extra kedusha, so he has this extra tznius, and he's wearing these extra garments, including the ephod that we're talking about right now. This is all according to Rashi, which again we're explaining that Rashi learns that it's mainly a garment. But now we're going to move on to the Rambam. According to the Rambam, however, the four garments of the golden garments of the Kohen Gadol are mainly not so much in the gather of garments, but they're mainly tachshitim. They're mainly there for ornaments. And as this could be understood from the psukim, that the tzitz, the choshen, the ephod, the me'il they're clearly not regular clothes. And that's why when the Rambam explains how the big day Kohen Gadol were made, what does he start with? He starts with the tzitz. If we're looking at it as an ornament, as I said before, then the main thing, if he's speaking about it's mainly l'chaved l'sefaris, it's mainly for glory, mainly for beauty, and that's the main point of it, is as an ornament, not as a garment. And first and foremost, you'll mention the tzitz, as we said before, that's clearly the most, in the sense of a tachshit. And the same thing the Rambam learns regarding the ephod, as could be understood from the content of the psukim, that it's a special tachshit, it's a special ornament, similar to the choshen, which is definitely a special tachshit, a special ornament. And therefore, according to the Rambam, he sees it simply that these are all special tachshitim and not garments, or mainly tachshitim. And that's why the Rambam doesn't say yearly, it appears to me, or anything like that, because he understands that from the simple reading of the psukim. Says the Rebbe, according to this, we'll also understand the differences between Rashi and the Rambam in the measurements and the way the ephod is worn. According to Rashi, since it's mainly a lavush, mainly a garment, and for the extra tznius, the extra covering of the Kohen Gadol, so we have the 3 points again, both in the length and in the width. So Rashi explains, the Rebbe explains, what does Rashi say? First of all, it starts off just beneath the elbows, not above it. Because when we're speaking about the back of the person, that's the main place where you're going to need, for tznius reasons, it's mainly going to be beneath the elbows. There's no need for it to be higher. Number 2, where does it reach? It reaches all the way down to the heels. Because it's tznius, you want to be covering down as much as possible, all the way down to the heels. On the back, it's not only exactly the size of the back of the person, it goes more than that. It folds over, it goes on over his hips, onto his stomach from each side, which brings out more this idea that it's a garment, because that's what Rashi is trying to tell us. Whereas the Rambam in Sefer Hayad, which is learning that it's mainly a tachshit, mainly an ornament, there's no need to come up with these new details, especially in Pshutei Shel Mikra, that it was all the way down to the heels. It's a tachshit. It doesn't need to go all the way down to the heels. You don't need to say it's bigger than the back of the person. So he just says it goes from the one side, from one shoulder to the other, and the length are from the elbows down on his back, all the way down to his feet. Now, why does the Rambam learn that the length starts from the elbows and not lower than the elbows, as Rashi says? So here the Rebbe introduces another point. And the Rebbe says that according to the Rambam, the ephod and the choshen are not two completely separate ornaments, but both of them together sort of complete one unit. Just like in the way the choshen and the ephod are used, is that when one would ask in the Urim V'Tumim, one would come to ask a question, and the Kohen Gadol would answer with Ruach HaKodesh. It's not only the Choshen, it's also the Ephod. They go together. As the Rambam says, the mile of the Kohen Gadol is that he would talk al pi Ephod v'HaChoshen b'Ruach HaKodesh. So it was a unit of Ephod and Choshen together. So just like in their function, they function together. Similarly, in the way that they are a ornament, they're both together creating the shleimus of this one ornament together. They are two pieces, two begadim, but they create together one ornament. And therefore the Rambam holds that the ephod cannot start beneath the elbows after the place where the choshen finished already. As Rashi holds that it starts beneath the elbows, but rather the Rambam says it starts right at the elbows, in the very place where the choshen, that's sort of the end where the choshen is going, it's exactly where the ephod is starting, because both together are going to create one unit, so there's going to be no interruption between them, no separation. And the Rebbe says, we could see this when we look carefully in the wording of the Rambam, when he's emphasizing the connection between the ephod and the choshen, the Rambam says like this, Nimtza, when the person wears, the Kohen Gadol wears the ephod and the choshen is going to be al liboy b'shaveh, exactly over his heart. The ephod is going to be behind him, and the cheshav ephod, the strap, is going to be tied over his heart, just beneath the choshen. In other words, it's one tachshin, it's one ornament, one complete garment that's put together from the choshen in the front over his heart, and right behind that, in the same place, starts the ephod behind him. Says the Rebbe, based on this way of understanding the Rambam, that the choshen and the ephod are one unit, we're going to understand some other dinim the way the Rambam says. In the order of the way the begadim are put on, the Rambam says, the Kohen Gadol, after he ties himself with the avnate, which is a separate one of the begadim, is the gartel, separate belt that he wears, the Rambam says he then puts on the me'il. On the me'il he puts the ephod and the choshen, and then he ties the strap, the belt of the ephod over the me'il beneath the choshen. From the wording of the Rambam, it sounds like that tying himself with that belt of the ephod was done after putting on the choshen. What about in the psukim? So in the psukim, we actually see two different things. In our parsha, where the command for the begadim are being made, it says that the way it's going to be put on, that's how ephod v'esachoshen will put on the ephod and the choshen, and then it says v'yafad toloi b'cheshav o ephod, and then you'll tie the strap of the ephod, which sounds like the way we just described from the Rambam. However, in Parshas Tzav, where it's speaking about not what should be done, but practically what actually happened, the pasuk says vayiten olav ephod, he put on the ephod on top of the me'il, tied with the belt of the ephod, vayepod loy boy. And only then did it says, and on top of that, he put the choshen. So the Ramban, dealing with this seeming difference between these psukim, so the Ramban says as follows, that here in Parshas Tzav, it first says that he put on the strap of the ephod before placing the choshen, because Moshe knew that the way people put on things is, as soon as you put on a particular garment, you tie the belt that's connected to that garment. And so you first had the avnate going right after the ksoinus, but the cheshav ephod, the strap of the ephod, is going to be put on right after the ephod. It's going to be strapped right after the ephod. It doesn't make sense to start separating in putting on the ephod, first putting on the ephod, and then doing something else, and then putting on the strap. But back in Parshas Tetzaveh, in our Parsha, where it says that v'esa ephod v'esa choshen, it says immediately the ephod and the choshen, and then it says to tie the strap. Says the Ramban, that's only because in Parshas Tetzaveh we really weren't discussing too much about the choshen at all. It's very bekitzer there. So we're speaking about the ephod and the choshen, and now we're going back to tying the ephod. So according to the Ramban, it sounds like the real way of doing it, the proper way of doing it, is that you would actually put on the strap first of the ephod and then the choshen. But from the Rambam, as we said, it seems pretty obvious that the tying of the cheshav ephod was after putting on the choshen. Why would that be? But based on the way we explained it before, we'll understand. The Ramban is going according to Rashi's opinion, that the choshen and the ephod are two types of garments, of the garments of the Kohen Gadol, and they are garments. And therefore the Ramban says you do exactly the way you do it with a garment, because they're two separate garments. You'll put on the ephod, you'll tie it, as finishing putting on the ephod, and then you'll get to the choshen, you'll put on the choshen. Whereas the Rambam who holds that the choshen and the ephod, yes, they're two garments, they're counted as 2 out of the 8 garments, but that they are one geder, one inyan together in the way they are. They're one lavush or one tachshit, one ornament. And the Rambam over here is actually, this is very interesting, the Rebbe says that Rambam is going according to his opinion that he mentioned earlier, that the choshen and the ephod always need to be attached to each other. The choshen is never supposed to be removed from the ephod. And anyone that moves the choshen from the ephod removes their separation in a way that he's trying to actually cause damage, ruin it, separate it, to get some malchus. The Rambam holds that this is not only when the Kohen Gadol is wearing it during the time of the Avodah, as others hold. But even not during the time of the Avodah, they always need to be together, because it's a din on the actual garment that a choshen and ephod need to be attached to each other and not to be separated. So according to the Rambam, that the choshen and ephod create one unit, they're always together. So the Rambam holds that the way they are put on is that on the me'il you put on the ephod and the choshen, they're both one thing, or go together. And then you'll tie the strap of the ephod, which is the completion not only of putting on the ephod, but it's also the completion of putting on the choshen, which was, so to speak, part 2 of the choshen. The choshen of the ephod is part of the choshen. The choshen and ephod were together, and therefore afterwards, again, you put on the ephod, you put on the choshen, and then go back to putting on the strap, because the ephod and the choshen were one unit. Says the Rebbe, from this Rashi, we also take out an amazing ayro in avodas Hashem. It's known, the Torah of the Baal Shem Tov, that every single thing that a Yid sees or hears is a ayro in the person's avodah to Hashem. And that's obvious. It's something that can be understood obvious, since everything the Eibishter created in the world, Hashem created nothing in vain. So the fact that the Eibishter led this Yid should see this particular incident that happened in the world, obviously that's also not in vain, chas v'shalom. It's for a certain purpose. And what's the purpose? The purpose of the creation of every person is ani nivreisi l'shamash eskoini. I'm created to serve Hashem. So therefore, of course, if I see something, it's meant to give me a hiro in my avodas Hashem. Rashi is teaching over here that this is something that's not only relevant to someone like a Kohen Gadol, or even to someone that's a Gadol b'shanim, an adult, that he has to take a lesson from everything, but this general idea is something that needs to be taught and really brought out well, that even a ben chamish lemikra should get it. How so? Says the Rebbe, it's known the story that the Malamdim tell the children in Cheder, when they learned this Rashi regarding the ephod being like an apron that the noble women wear when they ride the horses. Even though the majority of these Talmidim, especially the Ben Chamish Lemikra, would have never seen that. So what's Rashi giving as an example to them for? The Malamdim tell the story that Rashi was one time going in the street, and he saw a noblewoman riding on a horse, dressed in an apron. Rashi was actually pained. He was actually upset about this. Why did he have to see this? Why Mila was he shown this noblewoman? When Rashi came to write in the Torah about the ephod, Rashi suddenly felt all better. In other words, he was able to take Ayro and his avodah to the Eibishter. What's his avodah? His avodah is writing the Pirush ala Torah. So he's able to take in his avodah to use it as an explanation of the Torah, an explanation on Maisa HaEphod. And that would also be an explanation of why he was shown from above this idea, in order that he could understand better the Maisa HaEphod. From this he was able to understand that what's the ephod? It's not just an ornament, as you could seemingly think that that's what the Psukim are saying, but rather it's a geder of a lavush, as discussed previously at length. And Rashi is teaching this to a Ben Chamish Lemikra. Rashi is giving this message to a Ben Chamish Lemikra that everything that a Yid sees or hears, similar to seeing the noble women riding on their horses, the whole purpose is only to help out in Limud HaTorah and Kiyum HaMitzvos. Says the Rebbe, according to this, we can understand, but you can explain, but the diuk in Rashi's words, v'libi oimerli. And then Rashi uses it again, v'oid oimerli libi. Not as Rashi's usual expressions a number of times in his Pirush, even in this pasuk, where Rashi will just say vani oimer, or the like. So the Rebbe explains, this that Rashi saw over here is clearly not similar to other inyanim that a Yid sees or hears in the world, which are permissible things or mundane things, which, yes, you see these things and you take a hero in avodas Hashem. Rather, this sort of image is something that a Yid needs to try to avoid seeing such a thing. The Rebbe brings a Gemara over here, just briefly to explain the context of the Gemara. So this is referring to the tumah of a Zov and a Zova. And they have a special tumah that's transmitted in what's called the tumah of Mishkov or Moishov and Merkov, things that they sit on or ride on. Even if they didn't touch it directly, there's a very strict tumah that comes from them. But when we look in the psukim, when it's referring to the man, the Zov, it refers to it and speaks about any merk of anything that he rides on, which would be like a saddle on a horse, etc. Or a donkey. When it speaks about the woman, it speaks about anything that she sits on. So the Gemara explains why by the woman doesn't speak about riding, because basically that would be an unsneezdik thing for her to be sitting that way over an animal with legs on each side, spread out, etc. It would be an unsneezdik thing, and the Torah wants to avoid speaking like that. So although technically the tumah is exactly the same, both for the man and the woman, and therefore the Torah does not mention merkov when speaking about a woman. So in other words, we see from this that the concept of a woman riding on the horse is not exactly a very sneezdik thing. So back to what we were saying. So again, this is something that seemingly you shouldn't have even seen to start with. You shouldn't even be looking in that direction. Says the Rebbe, so the koyach, that even from such a thing to be able to take out Ohira and Avodas Hashem, and furthermore that it should even add in the understanding of Torah, that's connected specifically to Velev. To the Lev, that's what Rashi uses Velibi Oimerli. Why the Lev? So the Rebbe says that it's explained in Chassidus that the level of Yechidah, the deepest part of the Neshama, the Nekudas Hayadas, that's Pintel Yid, that's found by every single Yid equally. Where is that mainly found? Not so much in the brain, rather mainly believe in the heart. And when we speak about the Yechidah, there's nothing that can get in the way. There's nothing that can block out on it. Even things that are l'chayda, not according to Torah, cannot ever stand in the way of this Yechidah. And on the contrary, the idea to be able to transform even negative things, even Averis, into merits comes because of that power that we have, the Yechidah, the essence of the Nefesh that's found in our heart. And this is why it's specifically because of Libi, Rashi says, Libi, because of my heart I can be able to understand and can be able to do. That even when you see something that you didn't want to see, it's completely opposite of what you wanted to see. This noble woman riding on the horse. So on the one hand, yes, you do need to be upset about it, until eventually you'll be able to come from this to, as we say, Yisra in Ha'oir min ha'choshech, that even from something that you didn't want to see, will now take as the advantage and the benefit of the greatness of the light that comes out of the darkness, to be able to add in Kodesh, and like in our case, to be able to get a pirush and Maaseh HaEphod from the big day Kohen Gadol that is made, l'chavod u'l'sefaros.